Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast. And Clive and Christine have both looked in. Good morning to you both this morning. I hope everybody enjoyed the royal coronation yesterday. I have to admit I haven't watched a single minute of it. So, on with some motorcycle news then. What have I got for you today? Well, it's show 331. It's a fairly dull Sunday morning at the moment. We have news that Kawasaki have patented a magnetic brake. Yamaha are working on slow speed self-balancing technology. Police in Kent nabbed a biker who flipped a finger at a speed camera as he picked up 6 speeding tickets. They just sat by it and waited for him to come past the next time round, it seems. The most dangerous city in the US for motorcyclists has been revealed. And we can also see the size of the Chilean E-plant, which is supposed to be fixing the energy crisis. Meanwhile, Honda's middleweight e-bike that could arrive as soon as 2025. Garmin have released a new standalone GPS, and to compete with the on-screen displays on bikes, they're giving it ever more features. And we'll have a quick look too at a customised Royal Enfield Interlayan. Before we get on to the final point of the day, I mentioned a few shows ago that Devon and Cornwall would be deploying a drone as a safety measure, with the idea that popular motorcycling roads would be targeted. Well, a day after that announcement, they actually showed some footage from its first deployment, and it's been criticised in the motorcycle press as showing bikers in a bad light because they're just out enjoying the roads and taking in the scenery. Is that true? We'll have a look at some of the photos that the video footage has actually revealed, and Kevin's looked in. So right, quite a lot to get through today. So thank you all for looking in. Now then, on with the first story then. Well, this is quite an interesting one actually, because Kawasaki has applied for a new patent for an electronic brake that would act directly on the chain sprocket. Now, the various articles I've seen on the web all talk about how the electronic brake aims to stabilise the machine under braking, and how it could reduce the risk of low side crashes by therefore making riding safer on the track and on the road. Now, the crash that it's being said to prevent is during the front brake release phase. That's when you're braking into a corner. Now, the risk is here that easing off the front brake causes weight transfer on the bike, the front fork extends, and you end up with less loading on the front brake while you're at a big lean angle. Now, it's claimed that if the rider gets this wrong by leaning too far, because probably too high an entry through for the corner, the result is a low side crash. Now, this apparently is known now as a front closer crash, and there was me thinking that was some kind of a bra, but hey ho. So this new device, it's called an auxiliary brake, comes into play when the loading on the front tyre would be changed when that front brake is released. The braking load applied via the chain during the deceleration process would actually keep the front suspension partly loaded. That's the theory, even after the front brake has been released. But I did wonder if it would need to work along some kind of servo system operating on the front brake itself, which measures the brake pressure that the rider is applying to the lever and somehow integrates the lean angle with the necessary braking force, and actually modulates the pressure across from the mechanical front disc brakes to the sprocket mounted electronic brake as the rider eases off the front brake. Now, the new technology is not surprisingly currently being tested on sports bike. The patent shows a ZX-10R, which suggests very much it's being used as a track aid, but it's claimed that Kawasaki is also considering putting it on its road-going sport touring models, which I kind of wonder about. It presumably puts it into the category of lazy riding aids rather than true safety aids. Anyway, I would say that frankly it's unlikely to be much use on a road bike, except as perhaps a less obtrusive way of slowing a bike down when adaptive cruise control kicks in. So that, I suspect, is going to be one of its applications, to help the to maintain the bike's speed at a safe distance behind the vehicle ahead, but without actually having to apply the mechanical brakes. Now, let's think a bit laterally though. Let's think regenerative braking. Now, since electric motorcycles have limited battery space, the regenerative braking, which recovers energy, is going to be vital for any machine which is looking to do more than cover a city centre. So anything that increases the range of an electric bike is going to be looked at very closely indeed, I would have thought. And the latest regenerative systems are actually capable of recovering up to 70% of the kinetic energy of a vehicle. And if we can find some way of getting riders to stay off the disc brakes, yet still being able to slow down reasonably effectively, that would clearly be an attractive item. Now, we already know that Kawasaki has a working 4-speed electric motorcycle, because we've seen it. They've also got a hybrid based around a Ninja 400, which we've also seen. And we know back in 2016 that Kawasaki actually patented a complete electrical regeneration system via the electric motor, with what appeared to be a thumb brake linked to that particular system. So perhaps if a sprocket mounted auxiliary brake could allow for regenerative braking, but without taking the sort of power, the energy away from that, by using disc brakes. Now, okay, it would only work on the rear brake, but presumably you would have an electrical system monitoring how hard the rider is braking. We already have linked brakes, for example, which compensate quite nicely for how the rider's applying both brakes. Then you could modulate in the front brake beyond a certain braking threshold, so that for modest braking the electronic brake could do it all, but as the rider needs to brake harder, then the front brake could be progressively fed in. And a second thought that occurred to me is, I don't know how efficient that a motor designed to push the bike along is actually acting when it's in the sort of regenerative generator phase. I don't know if there is a sort of trade-off in efficiency. I suspect there probably is. So it may well be that the electronic brake on the sprocket would be a more effective way of capturing that energy. I don't know the answer to that. It's guesswork on my part, but I really would keep an eye on that if I were you. Meanwhile, you'll be interested to hear that Yamaha's working on a bike that self-balances. Now, this is all at low speed. It's part of a 3-tiered approach, which was announced by Yamaha last year, in which they pledged to eliminate motorcycle accidents whilst focusing on skills, connectivity and technology, whilst, they say, maintaining the thrill of riding as part of their commitment. Now, this is all to the Stockholm Declaration, which was something that the Federation of European Motorcyclists Associations, FEMA, put together in 2020, and which aims to reduce motorcycle casualties by 50% by 2030. So methinks they have their work cut out there. Now, the focus on technology is one of the 3 areas that Yamaha want to work on. They also want to work on improving rider knowledge and riding ability, which I would thoroughly approve of. But they want to support that with their sort of improvements in the bike technology and also in connectivity, so that they get more, I think, more feedback from how the machine's behaving. Now, the company's focus on rider aids is in part a reaction to the fact that they say 70% of all motorcycle accidents occur within 2 seconds of the instant starting, too quick for humans to react. And Yamaha say that developing self-balancing systems to increase stability at low speeds will be a major part of their effort, and they have a working self-balancing prototype now, which is based on the R25 sports bike, so a little lightweight thing. Now, the system aids the rider at low speed, but also when pulling away from a standstill. The project leader, Akitoshi Suzuki, he said, when starting or stopping, the drive actuator fitted to the front wheel aids with stability. And from there up to about 5 kph, around 3.1 miles per hour, the steering actuator attached to the bars takes over. Now this system, the Advanced Motorcycle Stability Assist System, it uses a 6-axis inertial measurement unit which works in tandem with 2 actuators. One provides small amounts of drive to the front wheel, the other makes minute adjustments to the steering. So basically what this does is it enables the bike to stay upright at a standstill by making tiny movements of the front wheel. This is exactly what a skilled trials rider can manage. I had a go at it years ago and never managed to be able to stand upright at a standstill. Can't do it on a bicycle either. Now, the system as it stands doesn't require any modifications to a motorcycle frame. These are add-on, bolt-on parts. So the system could theoretically be fitted to any production machine, and Yamaha are now working to shrink the prototype components. But I'd still say the question is why. Now, I'd say there's a point at which technology actually, rather than reinforcing rider skills, starts to take away basic skills. Now, it's true that few of us may be able to develop the level of skill that a top trials rider can manage, but the fact is few of us actually need to. Now, when I was teaching CBT, I taught thousands of riders to ride, and I can think of precisely one who simply never got the hang of balancing a motorcycle, and we sent him home and told him to go and practice with a bicycle and then come back when he could ride a bicycle. He never actually came back. Now, some get it straight away, others take a bit longer, but the fact is that everybody else I ever taught mastered the art of balancing a bike at low speed. And my worry with technology like this is it doesn't actually complement rider skill, it actually starts to degrade rider ability, because if the bike's doing the job, the rider doesn't need to. One of the perennial issues I see with motorcycling is riders getting on bikes they can't cope with because they're too big, too heavy or too powerful. And my fear is that if you start adding rider aids, then you, rather than deter riders from getting onto bikes that they really struggle with, the rider aids start to take over, and then it's the rider aids that are riding the bike and not the rider. So compared with the Kawasaki magnetic brake I talked about a moment ago, which appears to be a safety system which is designed to be as unobtrusive as possible, the Yamaha self-balancing system appears to want to take away from the rider altogether. Right, now don't forget these shows do go out on Thursdays. They go out Wednesdays and Sundays. They don't go out on Thursdays at all. You can catch up with them on my YouTube channel, but in the header list to the show you'll find that there's links to all this week's articles that I've published on coffee. They're all free to read. For the moment at least. If you become a supporter or a subscriber, you can get access to lots more of those articles. Right, so on with more news. So let me go. This is my little recorded section, give my voice a bit of a break. And in other news, a rider in Kent who repeatedly set off a speed camera 6 times in Tunbridge Wells and made what appeared to be a middle finger gesture towards the camera was caught in the act and had his bike seized on Wednesday 26th of April. Kent police decided to take action to target the rider, sending an unmarked police car to the location. Within 15 minutes the rider duly appeared, was stopped and found to be unlicensed and uninsured. The 44-year-old, who's not been named, was reported for both offences and will also face court over the speeding tickets. A decade of research from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration indicates that Jacksonville in Florida is the most dangerous city for motorcyclists in the USA. Between the years 2011 and 2021, the number of motorcycle deaths grew by 282%. And the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office said that there have been 11 fatalities this year so far. There were 18 in 2022. Across the state in 2022, there were 9,150 crashes involving motorcycles, resulting in more than 2,000 serious injuries and 590 deaths in the state. There's been a lot of talk recently in the popular biking motoring press about how biofuels and e-fuels will save the internal combustion engine, and those articles have pointed to initiatives such as Porsche's plant in Chile, which is now producing e-fuel from renewable energy sources. Most recently, HIF Global, one of the partner companies of Porsche in the Chilean plant, have secured a permit to construct what's said to be the world's largest e-fuel plant. Carbon-neutral e-fuels go straight into existing car engines to decarbonise the infrastructure we use every day, said Meg Gentle, Executive Director of the board of HIF Global. Auto Week describes the facility in southern Texas as a massive e-fuel plant. It will produce 200 million gallons of e-fuel each year, which is enough to fuel 400,000 cars. Just one problem. There are more than 22 million vehicles in Texas, and there are actually around 350,000 motorcycles. To produce enough biofuel to power anything like the current number of vehicles, huge areas of land currently producing food would have to switch to crops from which biofuel can be processed, and the same scale issues affect synthetic e-fuels. The photo is of the Chilean Porsche plant, not exactly geared up for volume production, is it? Yes, I know that it's in the pilot phase, and in around 5 years' time it's expected to produce around 500 million litres, but the output of these two plants is a drop in the ocean. The Texas plant would need to be 50 times bigger just to supply Texas. Frankly, I can't see biofuel and e-fuel happening, not outside of a few niche markets anyway. Some months ago, Honda first announced plans for a range of electric motorcycles, and at the Rose Bowl Parade in California earlier this year, they unveiled a prototype 125cc equivalent bike on their float. But according to the latest reports, Honda is in the process of developing the larger electric motorcycle that was teased, and it's going to be a significant step up from what's been seen so far. Whilst some motorcycle manufacturers, notably Triumph and Ducati, have been publicly sceptical of the idea of larger, high-powered electric motorcycles, Honda are said to be aiming for an equivalent power output to a 750cc gas-powered bike. Their own Hornet, of course, would be a perfect benchmark. And Honda's Vice President Noriaki Abe has now said that the company hopes to release this electric motorcycle as soon as 2025. It's also reported that Honda are developing electric motorcycles specifically for racing, and that's an interesting development, as there are no series such a bike could run in right now. And the other news is that Honda are also putting investment into researching the development of solid-state batteries for their future EVs. Right, okay, I'm back live. Kevin's looked in, good morning, and Kevin has also looked in. Good morning to you, Kevin. Enjoy your ride out there. Clive and Christine both said the volume on that section is quiet. I'm still trying to balance that out. It's really difficult to do that, actually, because I obviously have to listen to the playback before after the show's recorded to try to get an idea of where the levels is. I've actually upped the level this morning, so I will up it again. Right, okay. So anyway, on with the live news. Now, there was a time, of course, when almost every touring motorcyclist had a Garmin GPS bolted to the handlebars, but increasingly bikes, of course, are shipping with LCD displays which can be linked to navigation apps. So it was a bit of a surprise when I spotted that Garmin have just announced and released a new all-singing, all-dancing Zumo XT2, which is said to be the most advanced purpose-built motorcycle sat-nav yet. So what is new about it? Well, here's a picture of what it actually looks like. There we are, screenshot there. Now, one feature that it does have is a bigger 6-inch and ultra-bright screen, although precisely where you actually find somewhere to put that on most bikes is always a bit of a puzzle. It's also billed as having undergone a tough vibration testing procedure to ensure the durability of its components on a bike, making it, quote, the safest choice for motorbike navigation compared to a smartphone where high amplitude vibration in specific frequencies can degrade the smartphone's camera. That's clearly taking a dig at the Apple iPhone, the latest version of which has proven less than robust when mounted on motorcycles. Now, the new Garmin also gets enhanced visual route planning. You also get access to Michelin Scenic Roads and the Michelin Green Guide. They're built in. You get satellite imagery and the improved Garmin adventurous routing to find the hills, the curves, and the best sites. So, just to make sure you don't scare yourself too much while you're doing that, you can also customize your route based on 4 rider skill levels. So basically you get 4 different difficulty options for the ride. All the usual stuff is there: speed, acceleration, deceleration, elevation, waypoints, tracks and routes. You get real-time traffic and weather, navigation prompts, and the ability to stream music and make hands-free calls to a suitable Bluetooth headset. You get smart notifications when paired with the Tread smartphone app, and the device can issue rider alerts along the route to warn you of sharp curves and speed changes, and of course the nasty little red light and speed cameras that we come across. But one of the other interesting features, of course, is apart from the ability to track your ride, is the track your mates option, and you can see that on the screenshot here. The XT2 now comes with an additional pay-for feature, which allows it to work as a sort of group ride mobile. If there's no cellular coverage, then you can actually bolt on a group ride tracker accessory to your bike, and that's said to track friends when there's no signal. Not quite sure how that works. Finally, if you're really off the beaten track, you can unlock a satellite subscription which enables two-way messaging, location sharing and SOS capabilities in case of emergencies, all handled by your GPS. Now right now the ZT2 will set you back at no less than £529.99 plus the various subscriptions, and I very much suspect that you need a mount too. Clive said he really couldn't hear anything and missed it. I'll listen again later and pump the volume right up. Okay, do apologise for that. I will try and get that levelled with the standard microphone. Right, okay, anyway, if I'm honest, the current fad for customising motorcycles really does leave me pretty cold. I think many of them are pretty hideous, and it kind of upsets me when I see older machines chopped up too, essentially destroying what was an original motorcycle to make something that nobody is ever likely to ride. But I have to say that this particular machine, built by, I presume their name is Superb Motorcycles, did catch my attention. They're calling this the Superb Interlayan. So what is it actually? Well, you probably know about the Royal Enfield Himalayan, the single-cylinder bike, which is designed for off-road use mostly. Has a band of loyal followers who love its light weight and its simplicity and its ability to plod along. But it has to be said that whilst it may be in its element picking its way between rocks in the mountains, it doesn't really have the engine to push it along at highway speeds, and it seems I'm not the only one who realised this. You're supposed to have a photograph up on screen at the moment. Why you've not got the photograph up on screen? There it is. So Ian, who is one of the pair behind the Superb dealership, he had the idea of building a machine that was much more competent on the tarmac rather than just off-road when he had to ride a Himalayan to Devon. And he said some of our customers have multiple bikes and they love the Himalayan, but then they have to leave the Himalayan in the garage when they ride with their friends who have BMW GSs and Honda Africa Twins, and these guys never ride on the dirt. So Ian's vision was of a Himalayan that could cruise comfortably at triple-digit speeds all day long, and that's what he set about to build. So enter the Superb Royal Enfield Interlayan. So what is it all about? Well, essentially, Ian and his partner Jack, they took a standard Royal Enfield Interceptor chassis and made some comprehensive modifications. The stock chassis gets raised suspension at either end. That brings the ride height up 40 millimeters over the stock Interceptor. They get lighter anodized gold spoked wheels, which thankfully are actually tubeless in 19-inch front and 18-inch rear. I've always thought tubed tyres on bikes are a nightmare on the road. They might be fine off-road when you're at low speed, but on-road high-speed crashes from punctured tubes do happen. It's happened to me. So different seat for more comfort. You get handlebars that are raised as well over standard, and you get a custom made fuel tank. More on that in just a moment. Now the suspension geometry apparently remains as standard, although obviously there's a longer wheelbase and the longer forks and shocks. And it said to us it doesn't quite have the outright stability of the base road going machine. The bike does strike a useful balance between off-road and on-road dynamics. Jack says the engine is running in a stock state of tune, but it's been fitted with a replacement air filter and that 2-into-1 qualifier exhaust you see fitted there. But it means all told that the Interlayan should produce a power figure in the ballpark of the standard Interceptor 650, and luggage comes from Krieger and from Givi. So will we actually see one of these in production? Well, probably not. It's a one-off, and the company actually described the build as excruciatingly expensive. The tank apparently caused them huge problems because they had the bright idea of using the standard bottom half Interceptor tank, because that's got the fittings for the fuel pump and things like that in it, and the top half of a Himalayan tank, and then they would just shape them and weld them together for some extra capacity. But apparently it was actually a nightmare to finish. I'm not actually surprised listening to that. It's a bit of a shame though, as I think it's actually a rather delightful alternative to the ultra complex and ultra expensive BMWs and KTMs. Right, so finally, a few shows back I talked about the latest Devon and Cornwall police rider safety initiative, which deploys a drone to, quote, protect vulnerable road users by tracking speeds and detecting criminal behaviour. Now, as I said back in April, for vulnerable road user, read motorcyclist, the giveaway was the information that the drones would actually be employed on popular motorcycling routes. And now, with the moderately warm and sunny days finally starting to arrive, the drones have been out doing their business. Now, I first spotted the video footage, which I've taken the stills from on Visordown on Friday, when they shared this video, which they'd seen posted on a page called Emergency Services News. Now, this was actually already a share from another page called Caught on Camera on April the 24th. And I did a bit more digging, and I found the original video appears to have been shared to Twitter by Devon and Cornwall and Dorset Drone Team. Which implies riders in Dorset may also be seeing the drone hovering overhead in the not too distant future. Now, that first appeared on April the 8th, and it was said to be the day after a successful deployment. So, as I mentioned, I spotted it on Friday on Visordown, and it had been picked up by Simon Hancox as a topic for his Toad Talks series on Visordown. Now, the subheading says that the footage is supposed to show potentially dangerous riding on the region's roads. Supposed. That word gives me a bit of a clue about how Hancox was going to treat the videos. And he does in fact continue to say that the video has a, quote, condescending and snooze-worthy voiceover for added effect. In the video, we can see groups of bikers out and about on the roads enjoying the sunshine and their bikes. Well, I'd agree. The commentary isn't the most enthralling I've ever listened to. Whilst I wouldn't actually call it condescending, I would say that it's not entirely objective, which is a rather different matter. Now, Hancock continues, personally, I have few issues with the video, and he says, there isn't much wrong with most of the riding you can see. And just to show that it's not only people who sort of write and comment on these videos that get a bit carried away with hyperbole, he says that the not much wrong claim, he says there's no wheelies on public roads, no rolling burnouts, no stop puppies or people snatching handbags from elderly ladies collecting their pensions. It is, he says, just groups of bikers enjoying the roads and taking in the scenery. And then to amplify his point, he proceeds to analyse the clips. Now, the first clip, to quote the video commentary, shows a motorcyclist overtaking a vehicle while crossing a solid white line. So what does Hancock have to say about this? A fairly long quote here, but he says, one of the earliest clips ESN highlights shows a rider clipping a solid white line while overtaking on a straight piece of road, but not while they are rejoining their lane. It's as they are leaving it to perform the overtake. I understand that solid white lines are there for a reason, but surely clipping the white line as you begin the overtake is better than the opposite. At least in this instance, the rider had the clearest view of the road ahead and is better able to gauge whether or not a vehicle is coming in the opposite direction. It's also maximising the amount of space the rider has to make the overtake safely. Alright, so let's have a look at the clip, and here it is. So you can see the rider has already crossed the solid line. Now, generally speaking, as a sort of a loose rule, the solid line on our side of the road on a bend like this will break at the point our view reveals the road ahead. So without the rider's eye view, we can't actually say whether or not the rider had a full and unrestricted view of both sides of the road ahead. But as the overtake does play out, it certainly seems that the rider had plenty of space to have actually made the overtake anyway. So he could have left it just a little bit later and actually crossed that line when it had broken. It would have been a matter of what we can see, 30 metres, 40 metres or so. Then he wouldn't have had to break the rules which are there. The other thing is that solid lines will protect us against other hazards, such as overtaking past a junction, which of course is what we see here. The question I always ask when you approach a junction on the left on a right-hand bend is, can a driver coming the other way see the motorcycle when they commit to turning into the junction? If you think about the rider's position, having crossed the line, he's in the worst possible place to see an oncoming vehicle. If there had been one there, then potentially that vehicle could have been very close to the centre line, and he may not have spotted it. So without the ground view, as I said, it's a bit difficult to assess, but would I have made that overtake? Well, probably not at that point. So what about the next? Well, Hancock's comment this time is that the commentator mentions that the risky manoeuvre took place alarmingly close to a bend in the road, but made it back to their own side of the road before the next white line began. So let's have a look at the next picture. Here it is, just coming up. So there we are. Now you can see the second picture there, and you've got 4 bikes all having passed the car. So the white line starts in plenty of space between the blind bend. Again, we have this problem with a junction on the near side, so presumably that is the same bend. I'm not entirely sure about that, but that would be my guess. That would be the same one as the one we've just seen. Simply being on the right side of the law doesn't necessarily make the manoeuvre safe. The main safety issue, which neither the commentator nor Hancock picked up, is that junction again. Hancock goes on about the bikers just using their power to weight ratio to completely overtake before the solid line, but that only means they'll be approaching this junction more rapidly. Now, as Hancock says, the markings are there to notify motorists of potentially dangerous stretches of road, and they're there for riders too to use the same information. So again, what I'd be asking is, what if a car is coming the other way and is about to commit into a right turn? Would the bikes, having just finished their overtake and approaching at high speed, be able to deal with that? Even if the driver saw the bike, this is exactly the situation in which speed and distance gets miscalculated. And the other thing that was very obvious from watching the video is that in his efforts to completely overtake before the solid white line began, the final rider had to cut very close indeed in front of the car that he'd just overtaken. Was that safe? Well, not particularly. Was it ill-mannered? Definitely. So maybe the second pair of riders could actually have waited till they were round the bend before looking to make the pass at all. You know, watch the video yourself, make up your own mind. Okay, and then we have his final comment. Now, the last clip, as you can see, it shows a rider with a pillion, and what they've done is they've crossed the centre line in the road and they are apexing the corner on the wrong side of the centre line. Now, is it a sensible move? Well, it kind of depends on the view ahead. I probably wouldn't have bothered. It wasn't much of a bend that they needed to straighten out, really, particularly as the two riders were almost upright through the corners. They certainly weren't tramping on and using any speed, so I really don't think they had anything to gain from doing this. But again, the drone footage only tells the story from the drone's point of view. It doesn't take into account the rider's eye view of the road, how long they can see, that sort of thing. And you know, that's what I agree with Hancock when he says that. But the over-the-top commentary talks about the rider and pillion passenger caught as they brazenly ride on the wrong side of the road. That's just histrionics by the person doing the commentary. The dangerous manoeuvre that was caught on cam, it's not an offence. I thoroughly agree with Hancock on that point, and it didn't appear to inconvenience anyone either. So I'm kind of with Hancock's on that particular one. But he mentioned, or failed rather to mention, the two other video clips which also appeared in the video. And here's one of them. Now, this appears to be a solo rider passing two cars. He's just passed the white one. He's just about to pass the grey one. Now, first thing I would say here is the gap between those two vehicles is a bit on the tight side. There's not a lot of room to pull back in if we need to. So the rider is actually pretty much committed to doing a pass into those bends. And the interesting thing I would say is that he is passing on a hazard line, and the highway code says that we should think twice about passing on hazard lines because they're there for a reason. They tell us about a hazard. It's useful to have a look to see what the hazard might be, and in this case, if you look carefully, you can in fact see the road sign up there, which actually you can see it's a bit blurry, but it tells us that there is a double bend ahead. So the rider is overtaking into a gentle right hand kink, and what's beyond it? Well, the fact is that there is actually a much sharper left hand bend, and it's also just over the crest of a small hill. So the problem is, what can the rider actually see from where he is? There's also a little entrance of some sort on the right as well. So I wouldn't actually say that the rider made the best choice to overtake on this particular stretch of road. And once again, maybe the rider was aware of the risk that he was overtaking towards a blind area, dead ground, because he too cut back very close to the car that he passed, the grey car there. And on to the fifth problem. So here we go, another group out on a ride, and you can see the lead rider now committing to an overtake around two bends around the outside of a left-hand corner. Now, there's nothing specifically in the highway code that says don't do that. There's no solid line down the road. So it all depends really on the view across the bend. But there's one other factor here. Look at how close those two cars are. What does that tell me? Well, it tells me that the driver behind is being held up by the leading car, and the big danger is that that car may pull out to overtake too. Did the driver was the driver waiting to get round that first bend and onto what may be a straight following it? Possibly. So what if his mates had followed that through? I don't know. But whether the vehicles had, again, the rider had enough view across that, I don't honestly know. Possibly not, looking at the bush at the top of the screen there. The car that did actually appear coming the other way well after he cut back in. But again, what he did was he cut right across the front of the car that he was overtaking, and the fact that there was plenty of space, luck rather than judgment. So what do I say to that? Well, basically the judgment that Simon Hancock says that these videos are purporting to reveal dangerous motorcyclist behaviour, and that it's videos like this that give bikers a bad rep, encouraging high and mighty types to start making lives difficult by reporting riders for what they believe is dangerous riding. I don't disagree that there are problems in the way that video is reported by the person who did the voiceover, but you know, the Hancock's justification that it's simply riders out enjoying the roads and taking in the scenery, yeah, really, the commentary was poor. Yes, it missed some of the bigger errors, whilst erroneously reporting others. The brazen riding on the wrong side of the road, for example, not an offence, and doesn't appear to be anything dangerous at all. But equally, the claim that it's just bikers out enjoying the roads, taking the scenery, would hold rather more water if the 4 of the 5 clips didn't actually show some pretty questionable overtakes. Now, whether there's any deterrent factor in showing the videos, I honestly doubt, for 2 reasons. Firstly, there's no context to what we've just seen. We don't know about lines of sight, and how were they better for the rider, were they worse, and how they appear from several 100 feet up, I don't know. And the problem is it's going to be difficult to determine that from the drone footage. You'd really have to go back and compare it with on-bike footage to see what the rider saw. And you know, how long had the riders been stuck behind the cars? Those 2 cars that were following each other very close, for example, it's always possible that they've been following them for several miles and the rider finally run out of patience with the driver for not making an overtake. It's not a justification for making an overtake, but at least it becomes a little bit more understandable if we do that. But you know, the most frustrating thing is that this actually just feeds the victim mentality that so many motorcyclists suffer from. The Hancock's piece here delivers that attitude that motorcyclists are the victim of everybody else on the road in spades, and most riders won't focus on what they could learn from watching that video and thinking, well, could I have done that better? But they will be, like Hancock's, thinking that it's just the police finding another way to, quote, tick off some bikers for minor riding infringements. Right, okay, so that is it for today. Kevin has said, any links to the D and C footage and the chat is appreciated. Yeah, I did have that somewhere and I seem to have lost it. I'll put it in, I'll add it to the comments later. He says there's an increase in the overuse of solid lines. Well, yeah, this is one of those debates that goes on and on. The roads aren't exclusively for our use, so if they stop some slower vehicles overtaking, I can live with that on the bike. Generally speaking, I'm not inconvenienced for too long by solid lines. Paul says listening in whilst cleaning, adjusting and lubing the chain on the bike. Good for you, Paul. Right, okay, so Sue says, thank you, very interesting and informative. You are more than welcome, Sue. Right, okay, so that's pretty much it for today. Sorry about the quiet pre-recorded section. I am trying to balance out the sound on that. And as I said, it's not easy as you can't see levels whilst I'm talking on the microphone. I need to find some software that will allow me to see exactly what the audio levels are for recorded sections and spoken sections over the microphone. If anybody can point me in the direction of something that'll do that for not too much money, I would be very interested indeed. Right, okay, that's all for today. Back on Wednesday with the next show. Enjoy the rest of your bank holiday weekend, and if you are out there on the bike today, do make sure that you stay shiny side up.